The sea was silent. Not still. Never still. But silent in that way only the deep ocean could be, where sound died slowly and secrets drifted beneath the surface. The ZR Dolfijn, a walrus-class submarine of the Royal Netherlands Navy, slid through the cold waters of the North Atlantic like a phantom. Her dark hull blended with the deep, a ghost patrolling the twilight between nations. Commander Willem van Dijk stood at the center of the control room, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the dim glow of sonar screens. Tall, reserved, and deliberate, Van Dijk was the kind of officer who rarely raised his voice, yet never had to repeat a command. 20 years beneath the waves had taught him two truths: patience wins battles, and noise invites death. Today, both truths weighed heavily. To most, this patrol was routine, just another chess move on the underwater board. But Van Dijk knew different. Intelligence briefings had hinted at an increase in suspicious maritime activity just west of Norwegian territorial waters. Research vessels flagged to nations that had no scientific business in that area. Vessels that loitered for days, sometimes weeks, near sensitive undersea infrastructure. Some were collecting data. Others might be laying something far more dangerous. "Unknown contact bearing 085, said Lieutenant Jansen, the sonar technician, his voice a notch above a whisper. Slow-moving. Low-frequency signature. Could be a civilian trawler. But it's unusually quiet. Van Dijk turned slightly, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Classification? Jansen adjusted the filters, leaning in. Could be a surveillance vessel. Masked emissions, no AIS signal running too quiet for a fishing ship. Van Dijk nodded once. Bring us to periscope depth. Let's take a look. The submarine ascended gradually, hydraulics barely audible. When they reached depth, Van Dijk took position at the periscope, scanning the cold horizon. The water was deceptively calm above, the steel-gray sky pressing down like a held breath. Then he saw it, just over 5 kilometers off their bow. A large ship, painted dull white, drifting with deliberate aimlessness. No flag, no visible crew on deck. It looked harmless. It felt wrong. Mark this position, reduce speed, silent running. The command passed through the crew like a ripple. Fans slowed, pumps disengaged, lights dimmed. The Dolfijn became a whisper, gliding in the blind spot of the spy ship above. Inside the cramped hull, tension thickened. There was no sound, but the soft clicking of keys, the low thrum of the reactor, the occasional murmur of a report. Everyone on board understood the stakes. If they were detected, it wouldn't mean open conflict, at least not officially. But the consequences could spiral fast. Submarines didn't just surface to exchange pleasantries. Lieutenant Meyer, the XO, approached Van Dijk quietly. Sir, this ship, it's matching the profile of the Yantar class. Russians use them for cable tapping and underwater asset deployment. Van Dijk absorbed the information without blinking. Which means it may not be alone. That thought lingered like smoke. Spy ships of that class rarely operated without support. There could be another submarine nearby, one watching from the deep or worse, laying eyes on them already. Bring us below the thermocline, Van Dijk said. We go dark, no pings, no active comms. I want every hydrophone on full sensitivity. Orders were obeyed with practiced calm. The Dolfijn dipped again, sliding beneath a layer of warmer water, entering an acoustic shadow. Here, sonar was distorted. Friend and foe alike could vanish or appear as ghosts. The crew settled into the long watch. Every movement was slow, every breath conscious. No one dared disrupt the stillness. Then a new sound emerged, faint but deliberate. Jansen leaned closer to the sonar console. Multiple contacts, sir. Small signatures. Could be underwater drones. Van Dijk narrowed his eyes. Launched from the surface? Jansen nodded. Likely. They're sweeping an arc, almost like they're searching for something. The implication was clear. The spy ship wasn't just passing through. It was hunting, mapping, possibly laying down sensors or worse, mining NATO communication lines. And if the drones got too close, they might stumble on the Dolphin. "We're in their net," Meyer muttered. Van Dyke didn't respond. He simply watched the red arcs on the sonar display grow closer. Time slowed. The sub's hull creaked as it adjusted depth ever so slightly, angling for quieter water. Every bolt, every rivet groaned softly under the pressure. The crew waited in absolute silence, knowing the slightest noise, a dropped wrench, a cough, could betray them. Then something changed. Jansen's face went pale. "Sir, the surface ship. It's changing course. Toward us, directly and accelerating." Van Dyke felt it before he said it. The other ship knew. Somehow, whether by drone telemetry, passive sonar, or sheer luck, they'd been spotted or suspected. Either way, the game was over. "Hold course," Van Dyke ordered. "No noise, no sudden movements." He watched the sonar. The surface ship approached slowly, like a predator circling still water, waiting to see if something stirred beneath. It hovered for minutes, long, agonizing minutes. Then it stopped. "Engines idle," Jansen whispered. "They're just sitting there." The periscope view confirmed it. The white vessel loomed above them, silent as the grave. No signals, no drones, just waiting. Van Dyke didn't blink. "They're daring us to move." But he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he turned to Meyer and gave a single order. "Prepare for deep dive. We go cold, and we wait." The hull creaked as the submarine angled down again, sinking slowly into deeper black. The spy ship remained above, watching. But the Dolphin was gone, swallowed by the sea. No alarms, no headlines, just silence. For now. The deep dive brought with it a new kind of quiet, more suffocating than before. At 200 meters below, the Dolphin moved like a steel shadow drifting through ink. The ocean pressed in on all sides, a crushing silence that wrapped around the hull with invisible weight. Commander Van Dyke remained at his post, his face a statue of concentration. No panic, no doubt, only calculation. Inside the control room, the crew operated with a tense calm honed by experience. No one spoke unless necessary. Words cost oxygen. Sound risked detection. Every key tap was gentle, every step measured. The submarine's reactor had been throttled down to its lowest functional state. Even the air purifiers ran intermittently, leaving the atmosphere inside the sub dry and heavy. This wasn't just stealth. It was survival. Lieutenant Meyer broke the silence first. "Sir, the contact remains stationary. It's sitting above our previous depth. Not searching actively, just waiting." Van Dyke didn't look up. "That tells us something. Either they confirmed our presence or they're bluffing. In either case, they want a reaction." He stepped over to the navigation console and tapped the screen. "Plot a course south, along the seabed ridge. Let's see if they follow." Jansen, still at sonar, listened intently as the submarine began its slow turn. The ship above didn't move, but something else did. "New contact, low-frequency acoustic trail, port side, possibly a second vessel, no cavitation, could be another sub." That froze the room for a beat. A second submarine. Van Dyke had suspected it, but confirmation brought a different kind of pressure. This wasn't just surveillance now, it was coordinated shadowing. The foreign spy ship above was bait. The real threat was beneath or beside them. "Classification?" Van Dyke asked. Jansen adjusted the array. "Can't be sure, but the profile's consistent with a kilo class or similar. Electric diesel, silent, could be Russian, Chinese, no friendly IFF signatures." The Dolphin was now in the middle of a triangle. A surface spy ship above, an unknown sub to port, and a seafloor that offered no refuge. If they ran, they could be detected. If they surfaced, they'd be exposed. The only option was to move like a whisper and hope the sea was still on their side. Van Dyke decided. Deploy passive hydrophone array. Minimal noise. Let's see what the ocean's telling us. A thin cable, studded with hydrophones, trailed from the stern. It extended far enough to pick up sound signatures at a safe distance. Within minutes, Jansen's console lit up with more patterns. Sir, the second contact's slowing. It's mirroring our turn. Van Dyke clenched his jaw. So they see us or they're hunting blind, but well. He turned to Meyer. Prepare emergency maneuver protocols. If they box us in, we may have to break out with noise. Understood. Then the sonar lit up again. Another signal. This one was different. Not mechanical movement, but audio. A low, modulated pulse transmitted underwater. A frequency too deliberate to be background noise. Jansen played it through the internal speaker, just once. A deep, rhythmic pulse. Almost a code. Van Dyke frowned. Are they communicating? Possibly. Could be between the sub and the ship above, Jansen replied. Encrypted acoustic signals. Rare, but not unheard of. Van Dyke didn't answer right away. This was no longer a passive surveillance mission. This was electronic warfare. Covert, coordinated, and brazen. Send an encrypted burst to NATO command, he said finally. Use whale song modulation. Minimal ping. Include coordinates, sonar data, and suspected second contact. Priority Alpha Lieutenant Meyer hesitated. Sir, that burst could give us away. It's a calculated risk. If they're mapping our undersea cables or deploying surveillance assets, we can't stay silent forever. The message was sent in a compressed, highly encrypted burst. It would take only milliseconds, piggybacking on natural ocean sounds to evade standard detection. The Dolphin returned to complete silence immediately after. Everyone waited. No immediate reaction. No change in course from the foreign vessels. Just the same slow, deliberate stalking. Then, movement. The spy ship is deploying something, Jansen reported. Large object aft. Could be a towed sonar array or a drone net. Van Dyke exhaled slowly. They're fishing. The array could stretch for hundreds of meters, sweeping the area for unusual noise or shapes. If it touched the Dolphin, it could identify her presence or worse, snag her. Van Dyke moved with purpose now. Initiate evasion maneuver Bravo 6. Minimal thrust, change depth 50 meters. Bring us below their sweep pattern. The submarine pitched downward, adjusting its trim with painstaking slowness. The ballast tanks hissed softly. The hull groaned as pressure increased. Every creak felt like it might betray them. Minutes passed like hours. Then, silence again. Jansen spoke, hushed. We're beneath the array. Contact overhead still holding. No ping. Van Dyke gave a single nod. Hold position. Let them search shadows. The tension held firm for another hour. But eventually, the sonar contact from the second submarine began to fade. The surface ship shifted course, heading west, as if called away. They're leaving, Meyer said quietly. Van Dyke didn't relax. They got what they needed, or they realized we weren't taking the bait. He turned toward the crew. Maintain silent running. Let's hold for another hour. If all remains clear, we return to base. There were no cheers. Just quiet relief. The Dolphin had survived a brush with modern maritime espionage, not with firepower, but with discipline, silence, and patience. As the sub drifted deeper into the blue-black void, Van Dyke stared at the sonar screen. This wasn't over. The sea had become a battlefield, and every patrol was now a potential provocation. The North Sea had returned to its familiar rhythm, but for the crew of Gendarme's Dolphin, the silence no longer offered comfort. Back at cruising depth, the submarine moved carefully through the continental shelf, cutting a southern path toward safer waters. The immediate threat had passed, but the memory of being stalked in the deep remained etched in every crew member's mind. They had not fired a shot, not raised alarms, but they had been in combat nonetheless. Commander Van Dyke sat alone in the officers' mess, a mug of coffee growing cold in his hand. The dull throb of the engines hummed beneath his feet. He hadn't slept in over 30 hours. His thoughts were heavy, not with regret, but with calculation. Every move he'd made had preserved their cover, their vessel, their mission. And yet he knew. This encounter was only a symptom of something larger. The rules of naval engagement were shifting. Now, battles were fought with algorithms and silence instead of torpedoes and depth charges. Lieutenant Meyer entered quietly, closing the hatch behind him. "Signal received from The Hague. They've confirmed receipt of our transmission. NATO Subcommand is escalating the incident to Joint Maritime Intel. They want a full report upon docking." Van Dyke nodded slowly. "They'll find a pattern soon. We're not the first boat to encounter this kind of coordinated surveillance. They said the signal from the second sub matched Russian low-bandwidth comms," Meyer added, pausing. "But they also said the drone net used by the surface ship didn't match any known Russian spec." Van Dyke looked up, eyes narrowing. "Chinese? Possibly. Or something new. Hybrid tech." The implications hung in the air. It wasn't just about one foreign sub or one spy ship anymore. This was the opening act of a new underwater Cold War, fought in dark alleys beneath the ocean's surface. And the Dutch Navy, despite its modest size, was now squarely in the crosshairs. "Run a post-mission systems diagnostic. I want to be sure we weren't tagged," Van Dyke said firmly. "Hull scan, magnetics, acoustic signature logs. If they left anything on us, I want it found before we hit port." "Aye, sir." As Meyer left, the commander allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. It didn't last long. In the sonar room, Jansen was reviewing logs from the passive hydrophone array. Something odd caught his attention. A faint, repeating signal that had appeared just before the enemy sub faded from sonar. It had been dismissed as ambient noise. Now, isolated and filtered, it revealed a different pattern. 3 tones. Pause. 2 tones. Longer pause. Repeat. He called it in. Van Dyke arrived within minutes, leaning over Jansen's shoulder. "You're saying they dropped a beacon?" "Not exactly. It's not transmitting. It's passive. But the pattern, it's more like a handshake, a sonar signature left behind, waiting for something to respond." "A wake-up call," Van Dyke muttered. That changed things. If the enemy sub had seeded the area with dormant sonar buoys or acoustic triggers, they could be laying the groundwork for tracking future submarine traffic, or worse, setting a trap. "We need to mark this sector," Van Dyke said. "Send the data to Naval Command. Recommend deploying a surface team for recovery." Jansen hesitated. "Commander, if we found one, there could be more." "I'm counting on it," Van Dyke replied. "But it's not our job to sweep the ocean. It's our job to survive long enough to tell the right people." As the submarine approached Dutch waters, the tension aboard began to lift, if only slightly. The men and women of Dolphin had performed with quiet excellence, their discipline holding firm even when shadowed by a silent predator. Yet there was no celebration, no sense of triumph. Only the weight of what they now understood. The next time might be different. At dock, the Dolphin was met with more than the usual harbor crew. A team of military intelligence officers waited at the quay, their expressions unreadable. Van Dyke disembarked and handed off the sealed mission drive without a word. His face was blank, but his eyes were sharp. Inside the debriefing room, he delivered his report with precision. Every maneuver, every sound contact, every speculation was recorded. The analysts asked questions, some pointed, others vague. Van Dyke answered what he could and held back what he must. The sea had taught him that too much truth, like too much noise, could be dangerous. When it was over, he stood by the window, watching the sun disappear behind the horizon. Somewhere beyond that line, another sub was prowling. Another spy ship was listening. Another commander was making the same calculations in reverse. War, if it came, wouldn't announce itself with missiles and explosions. It would arrive in silence, in the soft click of sonar, the faint echo of a drone net, the whisper of a code left drifting in deep water. And when it did, men like Van Dyke would already be in motion. He turned away from the window and walked out of the room, leaving behind the echoes of an encounter that never officially happened. The ocean kept its secrets, but he knew one thing for certain: it would not be silent forever.